All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're breaking down the 5 days in late 2025 and early 2026 that absolutely shook Iran to its core. We're going to look at the economic tinderbox that was ready to blow, the spark of rebellion that lit the fuse, and what this all means for the future of a nation in turmoil.
And look, that's not an exaggeration, it's exactly what happened on the ground. A quiet rumble of unhappiness just exploded into this nationwide roar of defiance, creating the biggest uprising the country had seen in years.
So you gotta ask, right? What pushed an entire nation to the brink? Well, this wasn't some random event. It was a perfect storm that had been brewing for years, made up of economic despair, political frustration, and then a few final devastating blows. To really get what happened, you have to look at the fuel that fed this fire. And in Iran, that fuel was an economy that wasn't just struggling, it was in a total, catastrophic freefall.
Okay, just look at this number for a second. 1.45 million by the end of 2025. That's how many Iranian rials you needed to get just one single US dollar. I mean, that's not just a dip, that's a total collapse that wiped out people's life savings and made just getting by almost impossible. And when the currency crashed, this is what came next. You're talking about runaway inflation hitting as high as 50%. And the result of that? Everyday things, food, medicine, fuel, they suddenly became unaffordable luxuries. For millions of families, this wasn't some abstract economic problem. This was about whether you could put food on the table. It was a matter of survival, plain and simple.
So, what's crucial to understand here is that this wasn't just one thing. On top of that currency crash, you had crippling international sanctions choking the economy. At the same time, billions were being pumped into these expensive proxy wars all over the region. And then, to top it all off, that short but very costly 12-day war with Israel just a few months before had left the government's bank account pretty much empty.
And this chant, wow, you heard this everywhere on the streets, and it just perfectly captures what people were feeling. They were connecting the dots. They could see their country's money being spent in other places while they were struggling to even eat. It's that simple.
So you've got the economy in absolute ruins. The stage is set for an explosion. All right, so let's walk through this day by day and see exactly how that spark turned into a full-blown inferno over 5 incredibly intense days.
Okay, so here's the blow-by-blow. It kicks off with merchants striking, but then it just spreads like wildfire across the whole country. Things get violent, people are killed, but the defiance, it just keeps going. This shows just how fast things went from an economic complaint to a full-on political revolt. Let's really get into the details.
So, day one, it all starts right here in Tehran's Grand Bazaar, basically the economic heart of the country. The merchants, they are just fed up with the worthless currency, so they just shut down their shops. That's it. And that single act of protest quickly spread to other cities and got university students involved. And listen to this. This chant comes from day one, and when they say mullah, they're talking directly about the ruling clerics. This tells you everything. Right from the get-go, this wasn't just about money anymore. This was a direct shot at the entire system.
Okay, day 2. The movement just explodes. We're talking at least 21 provinces. And the regime's response? They announce a nationwide shutdown. And their excuse? Extreme cold. Seriously? Nobody bought it, of course. It just made people even angrier.
And you can see that anger in the chants. They get way bolder, targeting the supreme leader, Khamenei, by name. You have to understand, a chant like this would have been unthinkable and incredibly dangerous just a few weeks earlier. It's a huge sign that the wall of fear was just crumbling. Now we get to days 3 and 4, and this is where things get really violent. You see protesters burning symbols of the regime, even torching police stations. And the security forces, well, they escalate right back, opening fire on crowds with live rounds. The first deaths were reported in cities like Lordigan and Azna.
So we know that at least 7 protesters were confirmed killed during this time. But, and this is a big but, sources on the ground, human rights groups, they all say the real number is probably much, much higher. That was the tragic human cost of the crackdown.
You know, the sheer size of these protests and the violence, this was a huge setback for the regime. This wasn't just another protest they could sweep under the rug. This was exposing some really deep cracks in their foundation of power.
And this right here really shows you the disconnect. It's like 2 different worlds. On one side, you've got people just screaming for a way to survive and for real political change. And what's the regime's answer? Blame foreigners, shoot into crowds, and threaten to lock everyone up.
But out of all this chaos, something really interesting started to happen. A very specific political idea started to surface. Hearing chants like this one, calling for the return of the monarchy under the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, that showed there was an actual, organized alternative being talked about right there on the streets.
So what really made this uprising different from the ones before? Well, unlike past protests that were maybe about one thing, like fuel prices, this was about everything, the whole system failing. The economic collapse brought everyone together, different classes, different ethnic groups, all with one single target, the regime. And that unity, that's what made this so dangerous for them.
Which brings us to the big question. So what happens now? After 5 days of absolute fire, Iran is on a knife's edge. I mean, the whole situation is incredibly volatile, and the stakes couldn't be higher, not just for Iran, but for the whole world.
And then, things got even more complicated. The crisis went global. This statement from U.S. President Donald Trump just threw gasoline on the fire. It took what was a domestic uprising and instantly turned it into a potential international crisis, adding this whole other layer of danger to everything.
So all of this leaves us with one massive unanswered question. As things stand, the protests are still going, the anger is still there. And so the world is just watching, holding its breath, and wondering, is this another spark that's going to be stamped out? Or is this finally the blaze that changes around forever? The answer to that is still unwritten.